Hey Capshovians, mark your calendars for January 23rd and 24th as we bring you the first ever Capshovians Live in Orlando. We are bringing together a dozen expert speakers to dive deep into the just one, key strategy you need to scale your marketing and your business in 2024. You get an exclusive peek into the future of the Capsho software and connect with leading industry figures. Whether you're looking to network with fellow entrepreneurs, learn from top-notch experts, or just want a memorable experience, this is the place to be. We are keeping this event intentionally intimate so that you're not just another face in a crowded room. Yes, we want to get to know each and every one of you, so spots are very limited, which means you're going to need to grab your ticket now. Go to www.capshovianslive.com and get in on the early bird pricing before it goes up. That's www.capshovianslive.com, and let's take on 2024 together.
WV Uncommonplace. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts, along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episodes. The Uncommonplace digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to our Uncommonplace.
All right. Welcome to West Virginia Commonplace. My name is JR, and today I'm here with another JR, which is very interesting because it's not a JR versus JR episode, so it's not me talking about myself or anything like that. I have J.R. Johnson here with me on the show today. So the most nostalgic thing that we always ask the guest at the very beginning of the show is, who is J.R. Johnson? So JR, please take the floor real quick or take the mic and let us know who you are and why you are here today.
Hi, thanks, JR. I appreciate it. I write under the name J.R. Johnson. My first name is Jennifer.
Okay.
It's just an incredibly common name. So in everyday life, I go by Jennifer. That's who I am. I'm actually a writer of speculative fiction, which is why I'm here today. So I was fortunate enough to win a place in the Writers of the Future contest, which we can go into later, but it's a huge deal in the world of speculative fiction, and it was an amazing experience. And so I'm here because I was able to have that experience. I was able to be published in the Writers of the Future Volume 39 anthology book, which was an amazing experience. And I got to meet a lot of really interesting people, other writers, and to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have the opportunity to do, including some things like this podcast. And so I'm looking forward to talking about both writing fiction, what other people can do if they're interested in things like writing or illustrating in science fiction and fantasy, because that's what it's all about.
Okay. Now let's go back to your childhood. You grew up in Appalachia. When I read that in your bio, I play my banjo, so I was like, because that the spectrum of Appalachia is New York to Georgia.
It is,
and that's a very wide space. Because some people, their Appalachia is nothing but Pennsylvania. Some people, it's other things. Now we don't have to go into detail of exactly where you were, but so growing up in Appalachia, how did that help with your writing? And then I want to add this part in there. How did it help with your style of writing? Because the reason that I asked about your writing and your style of writing is this. I have talked to people that have left the United States and moved to Canada, have moved to different places, and they say that you may think that a hue or a color you see in one place is the same, but when you go somewhere different, the atmosphere, the way that the air hits you, everything moves you in a different mode and meaning. So how did Appalachia help you channel your inner writing and then your style of writing? That's the best way to ask it.
That's a great question. And I think people don't ask those sorts of questions enough. Like, how does place matter to you in your life, in your creative, expression, in how you how you actually interact with the world and how you interpret it through your work. So I grew up in central Pennsylvania. Most of my childhood was there, and it was a great place to grow up. It was just gorgeous. My father actually moved us there when he got a job, and he fell in love with it. He came for this job interview in the fall and said he thought it was one of the most gorgeous places he'd ever seen. A lot of rolling hills, incredible trees, and the colors and all of that. And so when you talk about things like the light or the feel of a place, I think you've really hit the nail on the head, because it is so particular. And even now, like I have moved up north, I've crossed the border, I'm up in Ontario. But sometimes it's beautiful here too, but sometimes we'll go for a drive or something, we'll cross over into Quebec, which has a slightly different geography.
Yes.
And it suddenly feels like I'm home, because the hills are rolling in that particular way. It's tight. And some people, if you grew up in the plains, you might feel claustrophobic. I don't know. But for me, it feels comfortable. It feels like a big hug from the landscape, right? And so
Yes.
yes, right. And part of that for me, in terms of what I'm doing with science fiction and fantasy, is that it always felt like there was something interesting around the corner, possibility, under every tree, around every rock. And when you're a kid, of course, especially, you make up things. It's like, oh, well, we go up for a walk up the mountain, and then you turn right down this road, and you keep going. There's a little path, and suddenly you're in a graveyard from the 1800s. And so you can think of all kinds of stories around that sort of environment, right? Or,
Okay.
there's a lot going on there.
Okay. Now let me ask you this, and this is probably the best part. You said, let me make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Speculative science fiction. Was that correct?
Speculative fiction, for
Speculative
me
fiction. I'm
anyway.
sorry. Yeah, speculative
Yes.
fiction. Can you explain that to the audience for anyone that is not wrapped around that? Because using a different adjective at the beginning of fiction, can mean different things to people, and some people don't even know that word. So, would you mind
Sure, sure.
expressing to the audience what that is, and how you got encompassed into all that?
Sure. I call it speculative fiction. It's basically science fiction. It's fantasy. So it's fiction that isn't true. Well, sorry, I should be clear. It's not real, but it can be very true. Fiction is always, if it's good, it is true. It has enough elements of your everyday, of humanity. Even if you're talking about aliens, right? There are real people involved. And the only difference is that for science fiction, you're dealing with things that are based in science. So it might be Star Trek, it might be, anti-gravity, it might be going to other planets, that kind of thing, spaceships and laser beams and that kind of stuff. Or fantasy, which is more Harry Potter, it's more magic, it's more, Lord of the Rings kind of fiction. And so it's things that science fiction is things that might someday be true. We might figure out laser guns, we might figure out spaceships and anti-gravity, but we're probably not ever actually going to figure out magic and magic wands. That's too bad. But you write stories about either one of those two things, and they're things that are not you're not going to see them when you walk outside. But if you lump them together like that, you can call it speculative fiction. It's something that you're making up as you go.
Okay.
But I love it, right? I love it. And I got into it because my father had science fiction mostly, and he read us The Lord of the Rings when we were kids. And I just grew up loving that kind of fiction. And so when I started thinking about writing, that's what I wanted to write.
And that's amazing. He took Lord of the Rings of anything he could have took, because he could have went and took you to something C.L.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Wood, Witch, and the Wardrobe, or anything. But he took you to Lord of the Rings, a Nordic type tale, and living where you lived, kind of get that feeling from that area too, or it could have happened. Vikings or anybody could have been out that way. So let me ask you this: since we got the first part of the scenery out of the way, was there a movie? And the reason I ask a movie is because my science, just to put a little filler in here real quick, my science fiction, like it was, what was it? It wasn't Space Odyssey. I don't even want to say it was Star Trek. It wasn't Star Wars that got me into science fiction. It was something silly.
Hmm.
or at least silly to me. I'm trying to think of it now, but I've forgotten. But I know that it was essentially the Aliens movies because
Hmm.
that seemed like it could, like you how you explained your performance of science fiction. To me, I could feel like that could have happened if the aliens had evolved and had came here. It was a more realistic story than what I would ever get from Star Wars or Star Trek, in my
Yes.
opinion. So
Yes.
the Aliens movies, they kind of did something for me, and I would almost say, that, yeah, it was Aliens and maybe the second Terminator.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one. Yeah. And I love that. Yes. To answer your question, yes, for me, it was Star Wars, the original. Um, don't even talk to me about the prequels. I don't want to go there. But, but episode four, as we call it now, that was for me the movie, right? And
Okay.
so we watched that all the time. That was my thing, right? And it got to the point where, yes, I could quote every single line in the movie, and
Whoa.
that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, stuff like that I loved. It was a classic, and it was the sort of thing that was accessible. I was young, and so it was really appealing to me on that level. I didn't need anything very complicated and philosophical. What I wanted was adventure, right? Like space
Okay.
adventure, and it was great
Yes.
for that, right?
And Star Wars is good
And
for that.
yeah, and the Terminator movies, I liked the first one; it was fine, but the second one, yes, I loved. I mean, that was fun and great, and like you say, it's the sort of thing you can imagine. I actually really like this approach for the stuff I'm writing. You can sort of imagine walking out your front door one day and that happened, right?
Right. Yes.
Right? The incredible comes to you. And I really like that in a lot of ways because it's kind of, it's a great way to capture what I think we all sort of hope in a sense that something extraordinary might happen one day. And the possibility of that, I think, it's really valuable to me personally. Like, oh, there might be wonder out there. There might be magic. There might be something really cool right around the corner.
Okay, and I definitely can go along with that. Now, real quick, I do need to do a sidebar. So, Return of the
Mhm.
Jedi wasn't your favorite Star Wars movie?
Oh no, sorry. Return of the Jedi, absolutely loved it. That's fine. No, like the first three movies were great,
Yes.
but the prequels, the Phantom Menaces, I can't really get behind that trilogy. That was not my favorite. So
And I can agree with you on that. I'm sorry we did that little sidebar of Star Wars, but we have Star Wars fans, and I've always said that Return of the Jedi was the movie for me. Star Wars did it
yes,
for me. Episode Strikes Back. I mean, Empire Strikes Back, not episode. Empire Strikes Back. It was great because it bridged the stories together. But Return of the Jedi,
yes,
if they
that
had
was
just
fantastic.
if they had stopped there, I wouldn't have no issue with life. I would just watch them continuously now. But on to better and
Yeah.
bigger and brighter things. So science fiction um, follow you around in life. So you move on to high school. High school is a time when people. I know I took a lot of creative writing classes. Did anything happen in high school or middle school that enhanced your writing to how you are today?
Wow, that is an interesting question. Um, I I don't think so, except possibly in a upside down kind of a way. I mean, high school was when I got more serious and not about writing. I got more serious about like, okay, I need to focus. I need to, do my academics. I need to this, that, and the other thing. And so actually the writing that I had been doing, and it wasn't a lot, but the writing I had been doing fell more by the wayside. And
Oh,
so I actually did a detour, right? I know, it happens. And it's actually, I mean, I'm happy to share that in some ways because it's nice to be able to tell people, hey, maybe you gave up on that dream, but it doesn't mean you have to leave it forever. You can come back. You can say, oh, there was that thing I wanted to do, drawing or writing or sculpting or anything else you might be into. Say, you know what? I haven't done it in a while, but that's okay. I can get back into it. And that's how it was for me. Like I actually have a PhD. And so I ended up going through academics and spending a lot of time on that. And then after a while, I was like, you know what? I really liked writing. Maybe I'll just try that again. Maybe I'll just pick it up and see if that's something I'd be into. And next thing I know, here I am.
And that's amazing. And I want to give you a quick thank you for coming on the show, but I want to give you another I'm amazed to be published in something that is tied to L. Ron Hubbard. And not to dive into Scientology or Dianetics or anything like that, just to be a part of Writers of the Future. That has to make you feel a certain way. That out of all these people, you were acknowledged.
It is astonishing in some ways. And I mean, yes, I know that there's a lot of discussions that can be had about that, but the contest itself it's independent of the Scientology issues, and it is very focused on writing, on helping to support science fiction, fantasy writers and illustrators.
Yes.
And so, yeah, they've put a lot of time, energy, money, and just social investment into making this the kind of program that can help writers do more. And they've been very successful at it. And yes, it's, in case people don't know, let me just kind of give a little description.
Okay, go ahead.
The Writers of the Future contest it's been going on now for 39 years. They're in their 40th year now. And it's a system where they really are set up. So L. Ron Hubbard put aside money in his will. He created this contest toward the end of his life and then set aside money in his will to support it. And what I really appreciate about what they've done with that is that they're really focused on bringing people in. It's all amateurs, right? So people who are already published at a high level, who already have novels or, are professional writers, they're not the people you're competing against, right? But they also bring in thousands of people a year. And the contest itself, you can submit every 3 months. So it's every quarter. You send them something. There's no fee to enter, which is a big deal in the world of science fiction and fantasy writing. There are places that do charge you. I tend not to recommend them, but in this case, there's no fee. And it's a great way to inspire you, just to motivate you, right? And so every 3 months, you can send in a new submission. And then they've got professional writers who are or illustrators who are judging these. And out of the thousands they get every quarter, they pick a small number. And then that small number in a year all comes together, and the top 12 writers out of that group are picked as winners. And they're the ones who are flown out to Los Angeles to do a week-long. It's not a creative writing conference in that sense. It's a week-long writing, a professional writing support system, essentially, right? You do some writing, but you also do a lot of discussion about how to be a professional writer, what's expected, questions you can ask all of these professionals, right? We had people from, professional writers. We had people from Hollywood. We had all kinds of people come in and talk to us and help us think about how to make a profession out of writing, if that's what you want to do. So it was very educational, very interesting, incredibly exhausting, and really an out of this world experience.
And thank you for giving us insight into that. So, what we do on the show, we used to have a segment called Author Circle, where I would bring on authors and ask them some more questions that were more tailored to authors, because we have tons of content creators that come across, but authors have a special place for me because that's a medium that you and I grew up with. That's from our generation, books. Mm-hmm. CDs came later, but anything else that's out now, I'm 38 years old, so I'm from I'm from the 80s. So so in the early 90s and stuff. So we have a different mode and mean of media. So what would you tell to an aspiring science fiction author or someone that wants to dip and dab into science fiction? What would be the first thing? Let's do this even better. If you were giving a TED Talk about becoming a science fiction writer, give me the first 2 sentences you would say.
Read. That's the first thing you need to do if you want to write. Those would be my first two sentences. I think that it's a bit of a cliche in terms of advice, but I think it's really true because you need to know a lot of things about writing. One is what you like to read. That's the first thing, right? You don't want to try writing something you're not interested in reading, right? It just isn't going to work. But also you need to get a handle on what is out there in the field, right? So, for example, you could have a great idea and you spend a year writing it and you think, this is incredible. I've written a story about very small creatures who meet a wizard and then go on a journey and meet dragons and elves and hang on, I've written Lord of the Rings, right? And you need to know what's already been done in the field so that you're not redoing it, but also so you get a good sense of who your audience is, what they like, what kinds of things you want to show them, what kinds of things they're already familiar with. And really, for something like an aspiring writer, you need a couple things. You need knowledge. You also need persistence. Writing is, I mean, it's cliche to say this, and social media has changed this a bit, but generally speaking, writing is a very isolated experience, right? It's the sort of thing where you spend a lot of time staring at your screen all by yourself in a room, and then you finally finish. This is great, and you send it out to a magazine or to an anthology, and you wait for weeks, possibly months, and you get a form rejection back, right? If you're really lucky, you might get comments, and rinse and repeat. This goes on for a long time. And so it really helps to understand that it's not always about you, right? So you need to write. You need to figure out how good you are by getting rejections and by reading other people's stuff, so you can judge against it. And you need to have fun with it because, one, yes, you are alone in that room for a long time by yourself, but the process itself is going to be much easier and smoother if you're having fun. Also, in my experience, the stuff that you write is better when you're having fun. So if you're sitting there cackling while you're, doing a space battle or something, that's likely to be some of your best stuff, right? So get in there, be persistent, but enjoy yourself too.
All right, and I thank you for that advice because that helped me out there. I think now it was a science fiction cartoon when I was a kid in the video game called Bucky O'Hare. I think I'm gonna go I'm gonna write me a fan fiction about that now after we get off the air.
Do that. That's great.
and just see where it takes me. I thank you for that inspiration there. Now let's dig deeper. I pay homage to a news magazine from the USA called 2020. 2020 was a great show. It still is. Diane Sawyer was on there. She was very poignant, to the point. John Stossel was the comedic relief on that show because he did some funny stuff sometimes. He did some serious stuff, but we remember him more for the funny stuff. And the late, great Barbara Walters, she could make any person personable. And personable is the hardest thing to do with people because I can ask you a million questions, but if I don't ask the question in the right tone, the right way, in the right mode, or me, we can both become flat. So, Jennifer, are you ready? Or JR, I'm sorry. Are you ready for your 2020 questions?
Bring it. Let's have it.
All right. So first question, and this is simple, success. Success is something that we all define, and this is a nostalgic question that I ask a lot of people. And the reason I want to ask you is because you've attained a certain type of level of success in my eyes that I admire. And I'm no one important or anything like that. But for me to admire someone on a literary perspective like that, and to do that in something that is prestige that I do know about, I'm amazed to have you on the show. It's kind of like, it's like a fan type deal it is a fan deal because I'm like, wow, I'm speaking to someone that has created something that has grown beyond just them in that an accepted community that I enjoy accepted your work. So my question to you is, sorry about that. I blew into the mic. That was crazy. How do you define and describe success? And when you do this is the gem inside this episode beyond everything that we've talked about. And we'll have to do a shameless plug later so people can find you on the internet. But The thing is, this is going to be the definitive period inside this show at 7:46 p.m. EST, September 26th. So, the floor is yours.
Success?
Yes.
I would define it, yes. I think it's a very personal thing. And for me, I'm not as focused on the external stuff, right? So, money, that sort of thing, I'm not as interested in. I'm mostly interested in one, creativity, and I like it being constructive, right? So I want to make things and I want to help people. That's basically my definition of success. And that could be a lot of things. That could be me baking cookies and giving some to my neighbor, right? I like to cook. I like to bake. But it's also something like getting this publication, right? That was a big deal for me. Like you said, it's like, oh, I've been accepted by a group with very high standards. And I've been ushered into this particular group, which has helped me meet all kinds of other writers at my level, which has been terrific, right? There's the group, the rest of the writers in this group are just amazing. They're all incredibly interesting, funny, friendly, intelligent, helpful people. And I got to spend a week with them in LA and we still talk, right? We've got a Discord server. It's amazing, right? And so it's like, oh, this is amazing. I love it. And to me, that feels like success, right? Writing something good that reaches somebody else, that feels like success.
Okay.
So that's the sort of thing that I like. That's what I'm aiming for.
Okay, and I like that answer. And that right there is one of the gems inside this episode. Everything else was a gem too, but this is the gem that we're looking for right there. Now the next question. This one is a tough one. This one is, you said the word stuck. I mean, I said I am tongue tied today. You said a word that I'm going to align with. Sorry, I'm tongue tied with criticism. You said,
Yes.
I don't know. I cannot say constructive. Constructive is not trying to come out of my mouth today. And the good thing about the show is we keep everything at a certain level. I edit certain things out, but I'm not going to edit that out because it takes away from what's organic here. So, criticism.
Yes.
We all have it. And me, I'll give you my take on it because I don't talk about it very much. But my take on criticism has changed. As long as I've been a content creator, and we'll just say a podcaster, let's not use content creator anymore. As a podcaster, I love criticism because it lets me know where my aim was, where my aim didn't meet certain people's expectation, and how to align my aim with what they want as long as it aligns and makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's something that's like, if someone just says you hit the microphone or something like that, I don't worry about that. Or I make mouth noises, obviously I don't want to make mouth noises. So I'm going to make sure I'm away from the microphone. And if I'm away from the microphone, I'm not making those noises, or I put a filter over top of this, depending on if I'm at home or not. So to me, I love that type of criticism. Now, constructive criticism, when it came to writing and stuff like that, I was really hard on myself because when I was in creative writing classes and I was writing these fan fictions or whatever I was doing in life, I really thought that was the best thing that I could be doing. I didn't want anybody's opinion. I just wanted you to like it, get it out the way, read it, and go about your business. And if I publish it, buy it. But I never publish anything. So how do you handle criticism?
That is an excellent question. And there are a lot of ways to handle criticism. One is to separate the two, like you're saying. There's good criticism, there's bad criticism, right? The bad stuff is just, it's either not thoughtful. It's just, I don't like it, either because I don't like you, or I don't like, science fiction, or I don't like whatever. Like, it's just, I don't like this, it sucks. That's not helpful, right? Helpful stuff is, boy, this isn't working for me because I'm not feeling the emotion, or I didn't really see the scene here, or I was confused about where the character was halfway through, right? That sort of thing is really helpful because it does tell you, oh, I'm missing my mark here, right? It tells you that there's more that you could do to help the person dive into this story or into this, movie or whatever it is you're doing. And one thing that helped me at one point, I don't even remember where I read this, but basically said, when you get criticism from someone, listen to what they say about it, but ignore what they say about how to fix it, right? Because that's your job. Like figuring out how to fix it is your job as the artist, as the writer, whatever it happens to be. So if you read something and tell me, boy, I really didn't get a sense, I had no idea what the framework was for this. Were they in the country? Were they in the city? Whatever. Maybe you could have them sit down and talk about what they were doing there, right? That solution may not work for you, and that's fine. But what it does tell you is that you need to make sure that your character sets the scene in a way that helps the reader come in with the character, right? The whole point is to bring the person who's experiencing this particular art, whatever it is, bring them into it, give them an experience. And so when you get criticism that is saying, oh, I kind of don't quite get that experience, that's really helpful. Right. And if you do get somebody who knows the kind of thing you're trying to do and has more experience at it than you, then they can come in and say, actually right here, paragraph 3, halfway down, you could just add one line and that would help. That's the kind of editing that I got when I was, in Writers of the Future. They have professional writers and editors that help you. You've accepted, they've accepted your story. You're about to be published, but they also do professional level editing, which is an education in and of itself, right? And so they show you how they go through the story, what they cut, what they want to add, and that was terrific as well. So I found it very helpful. And let me just sum by saying, criticism can be very hard because it's really hard to show people things. It's hard to say, here's this thing that I poured my lifeblood into, or just my time and energy and my care. And if you don't like it, I'll be sad, right? But yeah, that happens. But at the same time, you do that and you do it more. And what happens is that you'll find your audience, right? Yes. Like if the first person you talk to isn't big on your fan fiction or, don't know anything about it or just don't like speculative fiction or don't like fiction at all, or don't like reading, that's not your audience. And that's okay, because keep going. There are a lot of people in this world, right? You will find someone who can connect, and that's important.
Okay. And I definitely like that, and thank you for that. And that's another gem inside this episode. And to finish up these 2020 questions, because these are my favorite thing about doing these shows. So you have gained an accolade here. And inside this accolade, and you mentioned it, and I thank you for doing that, so I didn't have to ask that question. You attained some new skills.
Yes.
And at the same time, you refined some skills because you had some skills that you had left dormant. That volcano hadn't erupted yet. And they erupted when you were in Los Angeles. I can tell just by the way that you're passionate about how you talk and the way that you started enunciating different. When you go back to listen to this episode, pay attention to that later on down the, when you get it back so you can hear it. Because a different excitement from the very beginning till now when you started going in depth into what happened in LA. So we don't regret anything because regretting things puts us in a state of mental anguish. And as adults, we learned that mental anguish is not always the best thing to keep on you or wear like a cloak or anything like that. So my question to you, and this is hard, like this is the most personal question that I ask people. And I don't use the word self-care because I don't like that because I think that's kind of cheap. I don't use self-maintenance anymore, but I just say, how do you care for your being? Can you let us know how you do that? Because me, for instance, podcasting on certain levels is therapeutic. Being able to allow other people to have their voices heard from a platform that I built and people to acknowledge that, it's not the gratification I look for, but it's people acknowledging, hey, he provides a certain level of content that I like, so I will keep listening. And then the guests that come on are amazing. So, and they branch off to you, read your materials, interact with you across the internet. So my joy in life is making sure that uncommon and unheard things come out on West Virginia and Commonplace. And in this instance, not saying anything that you do is an uncommon place, but that form of fiction is uncommon to certain people, and now they're going to have the knowledge of that fiction. So I thank you for that, and your take on science fiction, and then your take also on Star Wars and science fiction as a whole, because we talked about Terminator. So one thing that I do on the show, and I want to do this real quick before I get you to answer that question for me, is I give everybody a testimony. So Jennifer, I want to say this. I met you in this pre-call. Our show had to be rescheduled. We had technical difficulties, but you were amazing. You stuck it through with me so that we could provide the show that we're doing right now. We're providing it under conditions that are different for you, but they work out for the show. And like I said, the greatest thing about a show is as long as you record it, you can always edit the show and you can always enhance it. So that's a great thing inside podcasting or anything with audio. So big ups to audio and to books also, because reading a book gives you a sense of comprehension, and comprehension is something that is lost in this world. So I want to tell you thank you for that, because doing science fiction, it gives you a deeper level of concentration, and your comprehension has to go along with your imagination. You have to have more sensory to read fiction and science fiction than anything else. Because I can read a manual all day and it's black and white, and it's black and white in my mind. But with what you do, you have to have a vivid imagination. You have to allow yourself to be free to what you're reading. So I want to thank you for that, because it takes a courageous person to do that. Because everybody now just likes to write, excuse my language, but we're going to cuss real quick. Everybody likes to write this cookie cutter shit and just put it out there to the masses, and just there it is, plain and form. Sort of like how we have so many superhero movies now. They're all cookie cutter, and it's all follows a certain stature. And what you're doing is going leaps and bounds, and it was recognized. And I'm glad that it was recognized early so that you will continue to do it. So on that note, the tenacity, the vigor of going out here in the world and deciding that, hey, I'm not going to conform to society's norms or anything like that. I'm going to express myself through the science fiction or the fiction that you decided that you want to provide. I want to tell you thank you for that. If no one's ever told you that, and I want you to continue doing that, spread that around, and then enhance and inspire the next generation of writers, because we need people to keep doing what you're doing, and we want you to continue what you're doing. But we hope that in all of this, the next part of your many faces that you have becomes a teacher to other people that will inspire them to go forward and go farther than what their mind saw that they could do. So thank you for that. Now,
no, thank you.
Now the question that I asked you, because I know I went into a lot, I almost forgot the question. I bet you forgot the question, didn't you?
Self-care.
Self-care, yeah. Or we'll say, how do you take care of yourself? However you want to put it. How do you do that?
That is an interesting question. And I think it's all bound together in a lot of ways, right? Like self-care. Well, one thing I do, or taking care of myself, one thing I do is I read a lot. And part of it is for work, quote unquote, right? Thinking about what other people are doing. But a lot of it is just, you know what? I need some downtime. I need to take my imagination and go and enjoy a different kind of a world. And that's how I do it usually. My husband games, other people golf, whatever. But, for me, it's reading. And so that helps me a lot. I also really like, this ties into the other things you were saying. My idea of success in a lot of ways is helping other people do things. And so, for example, one of the reasons why I did get more excited when I talked about LA was, one, it was an amazing and fascinating experience, but I also really appreciated meeting all those other writers. And for me, I'm an introvert. I don't spend a lot of time talking about myself, and I tend not to be very comfortable talking about myself, but I am very enthusiastic about boosting those other writers because they were amazing, right? And so if you do, go ahead, and here's my plug, right? If you do pick up L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future, Volume 39, which I recommend, I hope you like my story. I had fun writing it. I hope you have fun reading it, but the other writers were amazing, right? I read it and I thought, God, these guys are good, right? They're really good. And so you get the very best of the amateurs that are out there today. But when you say amateurs, it's not so, that doesn't quite capture it, right? These are people who have spent years, sometimes decades, perfecting their art. We had a retired law professor, we had a retired engineer, we had an astrophysicist, we had someone with a master's degree in literature. We had a mother of 5 who somehow managed to make time to write, and she was incredible, right? There are just so many really good writers there. And so for me, it's like, oh, I want to I want the world to discover them too, right? Because they were so good. And I think that they can really help people understand the world in a way that helps it make sense to them and helps them move through it in a way that keeps them strong and keeps them happy. And I can't think of anything better to be doing, frankly.
And I thank you for that. Now, to finish up this show, we like to give a shout out to people that help us along the way. Because me, for instance, my father passed away early, so my mother was, she was always intense with me and everything that I do. So I want to take a moment, if you don't mind, and I want to get you to thank all the people that have helped you along the way.
Well, that is impossible because
Or
so
however
many
you
people have, right? I will give it a stab, but honestly, this is actually something that was interesting because when you do go out to LA for the Writers of the Future conference, they have a gala dinner and everybody gets an award. And if we did have video on this, I would show you my award because it's here on my shelf. And you have to give a speech. And it's like, oh my goodness, how do I thank everybody who has helped me to this point? It was one, impossible, and two, something I had to do in front of cameras. And so it was like, okay, what do I do? First, obviously, my parents, right? One of the best things about my speech, I thought it was funny. I said, well, I want to thank my parents. They taught me how to read and write, and then they had to live with the consequences. And so they were amazing. But I had so many teachers. My actual teachers along the way, right? Like Mr. Cattell from fourth grade or whatever it happened to be, right? And so you have all these teachers, but then you just have people that you might meet along the way, even for 5 minutes, someone who says something positive to you, someone who gives you a hand at something, the librarian who finds the book for you, so much of that. And so there were all the people that we met out in LA, of course, obviously, but everything in between. My husband, who has read everything that I've written. My father, who has edited everything I've written, right? And so, my brother, who has been my partner in reading crime for decades, right? I mean, everybody who shares the love of reading and writing and the imagination and creativity. And it's one of those things where you can't thank everybody because there are so many people who help you. And even just understanding that and taking a second to acknowledge that is like, oh, wow, I wouldn't be here except for all of these people who have done so much. And it's humbling and really gratifying to think about. So thank you for asking that question.
All right, and thank you for answering it. Now, we'll finish this up real fast, and I'll do my normal little ending to the show. But I want to say this to you. Once again, thank you for coming on and just your aura. It's amazing. Keep that up, and I hope everybody keeps that going. Now,
thank you.
I am JR, and this is West Virginia Commonplace. And before I sign off, I want you, JR, real quick to let everybody know where they can meet and greet you across the internet, and leave with a mission statement for the aspiring authors and just people in general.
Well, my home on the web is jrjohnson.me. That's the best place to find me. I'm actually blogging daily there. I have been since the beginning of 2021 when the pandemic it was a bit much for me and I decided I was going to do something about it. So I'm there. If you want to see what I'm up to, check out my fiction. It's all there. jrjohnson.me. Sorry, what was the second thing you asked?
Leave us with a mission statement, something that we can something yes. That's thought-provoking that'll keep these people tied in. And when they leave the podcast, go read the show notes, then click on jrjohnson.me. They go to your stuff and they're like, wow, I'm captivated.
Well, I hope they're captivated. But what I really hope is that people find what works for them, right? Pursue your sparkle. Right? Like what excites you? What gets you enthusiastic? Do more of that, however you can, whether that's writing, whether it's reading, whether it's podcasting, whether it's fill in the blank, right? Take that and just follow it as far as you can. And it doesn't mean that you have to turn it into a job. It doesn't have to be something that becomes a burden in any way, but just think about how you can bring a little of that excitement and light into your life and try to do as much of that as you can. And I think that's a fantastic way to pursue both your interests and to make the world a little brighter, which I think we could all use right now.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. So on that note, I am JR and you are?
J.R. Johnson.
So I'll say JR Sparrow because I'm the host. And we are signing off. Hey everybody, this is JR from West Virginia Commonplace, and I am here to tell you about Anchor Nebula and their Go Anywhere series of projectors. They are some of the best projectors you can use when you're on the go, going camping, just even around the house. And these models include the Capsule 2, the Capsule 3 laser, and the brand new Mars 3. So definitely take time to go out and grab one of these projectors, and you will be immersed in an experience that you're not going to get anywhere else. Remember, Anchor Nebula is the way to go.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at onecommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.
Thank you.